I think the big problem that's staring everyone in the face in America right now, that we're either going to fall apart or find a way to work through, is that, and I think on some level everybody knows this, that this whole thing doesn't work anymore. And from my perspective, now I'll admit this is my bias, I'm a libertarian, but from my perspective, the big central problem here is that the government got way too powerful and way too big. And when you have this much power rooted in Washington, D.C., now the fact that we have drastically different cultures in the country, which has always been true. Brooklyn and Alabama have never been the same thing. Right. You know what I mean? But now it's this huge center of power that really was tremendously built up in the Bush and Obama and Trump years. And now one side gets control of it and rules over the other side, or the other side gets control and rules over the other side. So now you have to fight a civil war over who gets control of this.
Every 4 years.
Yes, and at a certain point, Americans are going to have to say, do we really want to do this anymore? Because the only alternative to this is some form of decentralization. So it could be as drastic as secession, where we just go, hey, we don't need to all be one country. I mean, we hate each other's guts. Why are we a country? What are we benefiting from being in a country with, like, one side looks at the other side as baby murderers and the other side looks at the other side as Nazis? It's like, okay, so why are we together? Would you ever be in a friendship with someone who you thought that about? Or the other answer, short of secession, is just decentralization. To scale back the power of the central federal government, allow state and local governments to have more authority, let people understand, we all have to accept that in Portland, they're not going to live the same way that they do in Florida, and lots of other examples.
And this is why it won't work. Because California is inviting of non-citizens into the country. And there are porous borders between California and the surrounding states. Yeah. And that means that if you live in, say, Nebraska, you have a very real threat to your laws if there are people who can enter easily. So let's say Nebraska says we don't allow, illegal immigration. They can enter in easily through California. There's no security. And they can easily pass from there into another state and then come into Nebraska. So then what do we get? Do we get state borders where they checkpoint
Well,
people?
no, it all depends on the employment laws. Some countries benefit from literally what I would say is akin to human slavery and allow immigrants to come in and work for pennies on the dollar. Other states don't allow it and say, hey, if you're not a citizen, you can't really work here. And they don't incentivize this kind of corporate slavery of the immigrant class that essentially, in my opinion, exploits them and creates a lose-lose situation for everyone.
Well, all you have to do, honestly, is not make it illegal to discriminate. So you just have to get rid of laws that, you don't need these forced association laws. And you can basically just say that, look, people have a right to discriminate and not let certain people into their communities, hire them at their businesses. And now, under current situations, you'll have big fat lawsuits, but you'd have to get rid of that stuff. But the pitch to California would have to be something like, look, you guys can have everything you want if you're your own state. I mean, you got the votes for all of it. Now, the problem they're going to have is it's all going to fall apart and none of it's going to work, which they've already experienced with their train system and the Medicare for all proposals and everything. It just doesn't work. But you're going to, the only way, I understand what you're saying, it's just not going to work. And you're right. There's a lot of reasons to think it's not going to work. But this isn't going to work either, what we're currently doing. And so you have to almost go well, look, the pitch has to be, how much more of this can we keep doing? Because, by the way, look, the next Trump might be 10 times worse than Donald Trump. He might actually be what the left thought Donald Trump was.
Well, the Republicans aren't going the likelihood that a Republican as we know it today wins in 4 years, I think, is slim. What will end up happening is the Republican in 4 years will be kind of like a center-left individual by today's standards. So, I should say by a true center-left individual. And it's because if someone like Trump, let's say we got somebody who had very, very similar policies, but was not, abrasive and was very charismatic, the media would annihilate them. They would say it's a smooth talking lie, just another Nazi. Look, his policy is the same as Trump. It would never work. So what's consistently happened is that the right is being pulled left every step of the way because they're desperate to appease the media.
Well, that's not the right as much as it is the Republican establishment, but that's very true for the Republican establishment. And this is why they're smoked. It's not because of Trump. Trump didn't destroy the Republicans. Trump brought a whole bunch of new people into the Republican Party. Trump just got them more votes than they've ever gotten on a presidential ticket. So it's not that Trump destroyed the party. The problem is that the Republican Party deserves to be they have nothing to stand on.
Right.
Like what can the Republicans?
What does Mitch McConnell stand for at this point?
Right. If you take Trump
Lindsey
out of the
Graham.
picture, what is the Republican Party? Can they say that what have they conserved? Have they protected the Constitution? Do they have claim to the Bill of Rights? Do they have claim to limited government?
Reducing the deficit?
Right, reducing the
the debt?
government. Do they have any claim to small government? Do they have any claim to tradition of any sense? Cultural tradition. They stand for what the left stood for 10 years ago.
Exactly.
That's all they ever
Exactly.
stand for. None of them would have the courage to oppose gay marriage. By the way, I'm for gay marriage. I'm not saying they should. I'm just saying they don't have a claim
That's what
to,
I mean,
to
though.
anything.
Look at McCain and Mitt Romney, and we go back all those years and where their stances were on cultural issues, and now look where the Republican Party is today. I think there's good things because I agree. Like I'm for gay marriage and I'm for freedoms and civil liberties and things like that. I actually lean left a lot on social issues too. I just think the woke left is particularly authoritarian about it. But one of the things Jack Murphy brings up is that it was the Republican Party accepting gay marriage that allowed him to actually vote Republican and support Donald Trump. In 4 years, there will be a Republican, I'm sure, and they will be substantially more progressive and more woke than anyone today. In fact, they probably will be to a certain degree woke. Yeah. They'll probably be kind of like me, where it's like they used to be a liberal, they're kind of left on some issues, but they're called far right.
Yeah.
And they'll still get attacked and destroyed in the media. I don't see how they'll actually win, even if they do move left.
Well, the left made a very important strategic move by aligning themselves with big tech and saying, you guys could do whatever you want, but you got to work with us. And they do work in tandem in such a way that's it's even entangled with the CIA. But again, you made a very good point. The Republicans are pretty much Democrats 10 years ago. And the bigger point you made is the common sense solution to all of this. If you have the big government, just decentralize it. Let people live how they want to live individually, because when you have a government that has enough money to give to other countries, that means they're taking too much money away from their taxpayers. They're too powerful, and they should be scaled to size where people get to have their individual expression of liberty, their individual expression of culture. Do what you want to do if you're California, if you're New York City, but if you're Alabama, let Alabama do Alabama. Let them do whatever they want to do.
Here's the problem. The people who live in, give me a red state, Texas, right? A large portion don't want abortion to be legal, right? Issues like that. They say abortion is murder, it is violence, and they won't allow that in their country. So they will continue to fight at the federal level for Supreme Court justices to overturn what they view as abhorrent and what should be illegal activity. The left will say, we can't allow them the controls of federal government over everybody. Listen.
But the federal government could just say it's a state issue.
No, they can't, because the left will say, the right will say, we are not going to allow New York to murder babies.
Yeah, but you know what? I don't think you're right about that, because the right has been losing for so long that just allowing Texas to ban abortion would be such a huge win for them. There's already, it's like, yeah, guys, either way, they can murder babies in New York. Okay, but at least now under this system, they're not going to be murdering them in your area now. And you know what? I think that would actually please a lot of right-wing people in Texas. And it would piss off left-wing people in New York.
And they would still go for the reins of federal power to tell Texas what to do.
Yes, probably, because that's in the
because the federal government incentivizes
that's in
it.
the leftist mindset.
If the federal government doesn't incentivize it and doesn't say we're going to rule for everyone, then it's a state-by-state issue. And individuals could say, I want to live in New York City where I have these freedoms, or I want to live in Texas where I have these different freedoms. But we should focus on protecting freedoms rather than limiting them.
Listen, I completely agree with you, but I also think that this is getting to a point where this is less like an ideological preference or a suggestion, and this is more like a doctor telling you need a blood transfusion.
Yes.
Now, you might say, like, well, I don't know how we're going to get this blood transfusion, and it might be hard to do. It's like, okay, well, you're going to die. Like, this is not a joke. Right. This country is on a suicide mission right now, and everybody knows that. This isn't a game anymore. I remember back in the Ron Paul days, right? Ron Paul used to always basically say that. I mean, those weren't his words, but he would basically say, this country's on a suicide mission. Like, this is an unsustainable path. It wasn't just like, look, I'm a libertarian and I have this ideology and I think we should all live this way. He was telling you that this system is doomed to fail. And back then, even when he convinced me of it, it was still kind of an abstraction. It was a concept. Now we're seeing it. We're watching it. This country is on a suicide mission, and this is the only solution to it. So we have to try somehow to move in that direction. Because the truth is, what you were saying about a right winger or a Republican winning, you're right, and you make good points. But we are going to go in a populist direction one way or the other for the simple reason that this type of corruption that just screws over the average person so much always leads to populism.
Yeah.
You can't. What we just had this last year was the biggest transfer of wealth from the middle class to the upper class in human history. I mean, it's just been an attack on small businesses and massive bailouts for big corporations, big banks. They're all
and
doing
the inflation
great.
of our currency, the mass printing of currency.
Well, and that goes right along with the same trend. I mean, when the new money gets created, it always goes to the top first, and they get all of the wealth. They extract wealth from the poor and the middle class. And when you have that scenario, of course, someone like Bernie Sanders or someone like Trump, who speaks to the average guy that, hey, let's take this whole thing on and win for you, even if they both have some idiotic ideas of how to do that. That's always going to be popular. And then what that requires is more government suppression in order to suppress the populist voices. So we're going to be in this cycle that's going to kill us unless we decentralize.
Well, they milked this country to the tune of $28 trillion. There's no going back from that. The larger economic ramifications are terrifying.
The way I view what's been happening is we're two sides continually trying to build a tower to see in the other direction, right? Let me imagine it this way. You've got two buildings. And the people on top are like, I want to see the other side. I want to see the mountains. Well, I want to see the ocean. So the left builds a little higher, and now they can see the ocean. So the right says, well, now I can't see. So they keep going up. Eventually, the towers are getting so big, they're starting to sway back and forth. And the bigger they get, the more they sway, the more violent it becomes. And then eventually, they both snap and collapse and crush under their own weight. That's what's happening if this escalation keeps occurring until someone finally says, I'm going to stop. But you know what? People aren't going to stop. You know why? I believe in freedom, free expression, individual liberties, individual rights, the Constitution. I don't like authoritarianism, be it from corporations or the government. And there are people on the left who think the government should mandate what people do because the planet is doomed. They think we're on a collision course with the planet's going to explode. And so they're willing to destroy your life and sacrifice you for the greater good. It's a very utilitarian versus deontological argument. You have people on the left saying the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. And then you have many people on the right saying any act against an individual is an amoral act that cannot be, conducted. So ultimately what that leads to is one side saying, I will not let you destroy this planet. And the other side saying, I will not let you oppress individual rights. No one is going to back down from that fight. Or would you say, you know what? In the interest of peace, I will allow the left to continue their expansion of authority and wokeness and then all that.
They're doing it now anyway.
I mean,
so you would.
But what's the actual proposal there? So in the interest of peace, would I say that Portland can go as woke as they want to, as long as they don't force that on the rest of the country?
No, that they take the rest of the country over and instill their ideology over everyone else to prevent fighting.
No, that I think needs to be fought against. I mean, because
and they say the same thing. You see the point.
Yeah.
Why would I say to the woke authoritarian communist types that I'm going to let them oppress people? I won't. I'll say, look, in Portland, I've actually where I was earlier in the year was like, shut it down. That's crazy. And now I'm kind of like, it's Portland. They voted for it. They must want it. Who am I to intervene? But to put that on the rest of the country, to see the woke left call for the things they're calling for when they're like, it's the craziest thing when I hear them say, all we want to do is give the right wingers health care, but they're so dumb they don't understand it. And it's like, no, maybe you don't understand. They don't want to live by your rules.
Yeah, look, I'm with you, okay? And it's kind of like the challenge is daunting. You know what I mean? And it's like, but it's worth attempting. And to me, what you
mean like a peaceful?
Yes.
Right.
The only option that we have is to, as we were talking about before, that a military confrontation with the most militarized government ever is not going to work, and it will just lead to bloodshed. All we have is the power of ideas. And the truth is that there is still a remnant of decency in the human spirit. And a lot of people there is a huge movement of people who are turned off by the woke stuff. There's a huge movement of people who are turned off by a lot of the just swampiness of the establishment in general. The problem is that the other side always scares them back into their base.
Right.
So a lot of the kind of like liberal left who doesn't like the woke stuff, and there's a lot of them out there. I think the vast majority of them are silent because they're kind of cowards about it, which I think is part of the personality type of the liberal left in general. But so they're too cowardice to ever be called racist, but Then they see Trump and they're like, okay, well, this guy's too gross for me, so I'm just going to stick in this kind of camp here. Or some of them might walk away. Yeah, well, that's true.
Like, I'm going to vote for this guy.
That is true too. But the truth is that you have to find different ways to attack this stuff. And what doesn't get confronted enough to me about the whole woke movement is that like people battle it and how stupid it is. And that's kind of easy. And it's true. And it's divisive and it's racist and it's horrible. And it's also just really, really dumb. Like, it's really, really dumb. This is why Ben Shapiro got so popular, because he'd battle their woke ideas, and people would just look at him and be like, this is so, like, absurdly ridiculous. He can just shred these ideas up. But what's not mentioned enough is what is actually going on here and how brilliant the whole woke movement was. It's like, why do you think this stuff is pushed by government and big corporations and big banks at the highest level? Like, why is it? It's like, well, what was the left doing 10 years ago? You know, say whatever you will about the left. 10 years ago, the left was standing outside the big banks screaming, we are the 99%. You think that got some attention out of people? Do you think it's crazy that all of a sudden they have completely thrown you off the scent now and just have you focusing on microaggressions? Just imagine, like I was saying this when I was on Rogan a couple weeks ago to him, where I was like, imagine you're Goldman Sachs exec, right? And you have Bernie Sanders coming up and he's going, there should be no billionaires. And you're like, huh. And then some other like woke kid comes up and goes, I want to talk about microaggressions. I think you'd be like, yeah, I like microaggressions guy has something he wants to say. Let's focus on that guy. So this has all been just to pull the wool over the eyes of the left, because the left, when it's at its best, is actually a threat to this power structure.
Yeah. I want to show you guys this comic because it's great. And I've mentioned it before. It's a man sitting at a desk. Outside his window, it's a business guy sitting at his foofy desk with his degrees on the wall. And outside is a bunch of people protesting, holding a big sign, Occupy Wall Street, Stop Corporate Greed, Fat Cats. And the man inside is smirking on the phone and he says, introduce them to identity politics. And I remember, because I was at Occupy Wall Street, as was Luke, when this started happening. When it went from we are the 99%, the big banks have extracted the wealth of the people for too long, to all of a sudden, twinkle fingers, progressive stack, if you're white, you're not allowed to speak.
Yeah, and when we look at all of their kind of woke ideology, it's meant to divide and conquer. Whether it's your family members, whether it's your race, whether it's your sex, whether it's your identity, whatever little category they could put you in to make you feel different and make you fight someone else who is not on your side, intersectional, identifying as it or this or whatever you want to do. You're creating essentially pacts that are meant to drive wedges into our modern day culture, so we're at each other's throats. Not even understanding and being afraid to talk to each other because you don't want to offend someone if you use the proper pronouns or not. What kind of civilization and society are we living in where we can't even say, hey, you, buddy, bloke, whatever? There's a guy in the UK who went to jail for calling someone a bloke.
And this is why the left eats itself. It is not a bug. It is a feature of what they do. They don't want them to ever actually be able to unify around anything cohesive. So everything they do is offensive. My favorite moment in this whole nonsense was when one organization came out. It was like International Organization for Women or something. I forgot what the name was. And they said Womixen. WOMXN. Womixen. I don't know. And they say it's pronounced Wimminks. And they got attacked by the left. And they said using the word Womixen is offensive because you are implying you need a special word for trans women, but trans women are women. How dare you say this? Yeah. So then they apologized and put it back to women, and they still got flack. Because women is an old patriarchal term that separates the genders that don't exist. Look, and the point is, they've created an ideology that is attacking itself on purpose so that it can't unify against anyone.
Well, this is another thing. We used to talk about facts. We used to talk about evidence. Now we're talking about what are you? What's your identity? And I get attacked on this nonstop on Twitter. You're a misogynist. You are a white male. I choose not to even engage in that because I'm like, let's talk about the merits of this debate, and people don't. They want
it's look, they've turned the best aspect of the left against the left and made it a vice rather than a virtue. In the same sense that, look, what they did with the terror wars was they turned the right-wing impulse to be tough and protect your country and defend the Bill of Rights, this really beautiful, noble thing, and they turned that into slaughtering poor people in third world countries.
Yep.
They take this noble thing and they make it evil. They're geniuses. And what they've done is they take this leftist kind of impulse to care about the marginalized, which in its purest form is a good thing, something that a society, a moral society needs. And they've turned this into attacking everyone for every stupid reason. But it's to Luke's point. This is the perfect, it's the perfect divide and conquer tactic that can never, you can make sure that they never focus on the fact that we have more in common with each other than we ever will with Donald Trump or Joe Biden.
And when they're fighting each other, the corporations do whatever they want.
And what I've said before is that when we had these civil rights groups that were fighting against racism, fighting for social justice, civil rights, it was kind of like an immune response. We had something bad, and we said we're not going to succeed if we're divided all the time. And so this movement emerged for equality under the law in the 1964 Civil Rights Act, followed by Loving v. Virginia, which said, under the law, we are all Americans, and that is our identity, American citizens. Then we start to get an immune overreaction. Now these people are looking for racism everywhere. They still are operating under this immune response, but it's more now like an autoimmune disorder, attacking healthy cells, thinking it's a diseased cell. And that's when a living creature dies. There are numerous disorders that are like that, an overactive, targeting the wrong thing and destroying it.
Okay, so just really quickly, it's a very quick story, but my buddy, Scott Horton, who I don't know if you know him, but he's a genius. He's the managing editor at antiwar.com. He's the greatest. Anyway, you guys check out Scott Horton if you don't know who he is. But he was telling me this story, and this is a great example of how they divide us with this stuff when we should all be together. But it was at the Bundy Ranch standoff, and he was talking to one of these, I forget, but it was one of the leaders in the Black Lives Matter movement at the time, and he was basically telling this lady, he was like, you guys should stand with the Bundy Ranchers because you guys have so much in common here, and you could unify and make it like a left and right thing and really focus on who the enemy is. And she showed him a picture, and it was one of the Bundy Ranchers had a F BLM shirt on. And he goes, no, see, they hate us. They hate everything we stand for. And he goes, no. That's Bureau of Land Management, AKA the cops.
Yeah.
They hate the cops.
Right.
They're the same as you. It's literally just a different version of the same thing.
Trying to explain the Bundy thing to people is funny because it comes up all the time. I'm like, they were criticizing BLM, and they're like, Black Lives Matter? And I'm like, no, Bureau of Land Management. And they're like, oh.
In other words, the federal cops. It's the same thing. It's just literally people who are saying that they want to live their lives, and there are these federal agents who are coming through and bringing violence to them for no justifiable reason. And that is something that could unite people. Yep. But to me, the way to attack the woke stuff is more than just calling it stupid and smashing it, because that's just been done to death at this point, is to let good, decent leftists know that they have fooled you with this. And they are laughing at you. Yep. Those same bankers are cracking up laughing that you're talking about white supremacy rather than talking about banker bailouts.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. We do the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. So come back to check us out when we go live. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, hit the notification bell, and we are also available on all podcast platforms for free if you want to listen to us there. Thanks for hanging out, and we will see you all next time.